Today we are making sourdough sandwich bread. You guys are going to love this recipe. It is easy to make, convenient, and freezer friendly. It has a beautiful golden crust that is nice and tender, and it is so soft and fluffy. It's the perfect everyday bread. So grab your starter and let's get started. First off, you're gonna grab a bowl, and as I always say, grab your kitchen scale for the easiest way to measure your ingredients. First off, we're gonna grab 300 grams or 1 1/3 cups of warm water. Next, we're gonna add our active starter. Remember, your starter, when it's active, is doubled in size, bubbles all throughout, and almost looks crater-like on the top. That's when you know it's ready to use. We're gonna add 65 grams or a heaping 1/4 cup of active sourdough starter. Ooh, on the money. To that, we're gonna add 57 grams or 1/4 a cup of melted unsalted butter. Then we're gonna add 25 grams or 2 tablespoons of sugar. You can replace this with honey if you'd prefer. Use 25 grams or 1 tablespoon instead. Give that a little whisk with your Danish dough whisk. To that, you're gonna add 400 grams or 2 3/4 cups plus 1 tablespoon of bread flour. And then you're gonna add 100 grams or 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. You can make this loaf with 100% all-purpose flour, but I love using the majority of bread flour because bread flour has a higher percentage of protein in the flour, and that allows your sourdough sandwich bread to rise nice and high, which I love, making it nice and soft and fluffy. But again, you can make this with all-purpose flour if you prefer. For a little bit of contrast, we're gonna add 9 grams or 1½ teaspoons of salt. Mix the ingredients up until everything is combined. As you can see, the dough looks shaggy, totally normal. Now we're going to leave our dough to rest for 30 minutes, so cover it up and we'll be right back. It's been 30 minutes and we let our dough relax. Now it's time for a short knead. In order to do this, you're going to scoop to the bottom of the bowl. You're going to pull up the dough, fold it over itself, and push it down with the heel of your hand. Continue to rotate the bowl and repeat that same motion over and over about 20 times. And that's it for kneading. Look how nice and smooth the dough is starting to look. Beautiful. We're gonna place the dough back into the bowl and complete its bulk fermentation. Cover it up and place it in a warm spot. We're gonna leave our dough to double in size. For my 70-degree kitchen, this can take anywhere between 8 to 10 hours. So if your kitchen is warmer, it will take less time. If your kitchen is cooler, it will take longer. Again, remember, don't look at the clock when you're following this recipe. Look for the signs that your dough is done fermenting. I prepared this dough last night for today's video, and as you can see, it has risen beautifully. It has a nice dome top to it. It's tacky to the touch, it's not sticky. And as you can see, we have beautiful action going underneath, as you can see on the bottom of my glass bowl. And she's ready to shape. Before we remove the dough from the bowl, we're actually going to punch it. We want to do this because we are looking for a tighter crumb. During the fermentation process, there is a buildup of gas, and so by punching the dough, we release the gas, creating that tighter crumb. And so in order to do that, you're going to create a fist with your hand, and just as the name says, you're going to punch the center of the dough firmly until you reach the bottom of the bowl. Now it's time to remove the dough and place it on your work surface. You can use your hands to do this. I'm just going to use a bowl scraper to help release the dough from the bowl. And just like that. Once your loaf is on your countertop, I like to stretch it into a large rectangle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I like to use my loaf pan actually as a form of reference of how long my dough should be, and that way it will fit nicely in our loaf pan. Perfect. I prefer using this size loaf pan because it allows my loaves to rise beautifully. Once it's baked, I have nice, tall, fluffy slices of sourdough bread, whereas other sizes tend to bake a little bit shorter and wider, and that's just not my preference. Before I shape my sourdough loaf, I am going to grease my loaf pan. I like to use some butter. You could use some cooking spray, whatever you have. Now that my loaf pan is all prepped and ready to go, it's time to shape your loaf. What I like to do is I will take the corners and I just curl it in just to keep that nice tucked look. And I will continue to roll the sandwich dough over itself, similar to a cinnamon roll. Every so often, take the edges and just tuck it under. Continue to roll. Grab the edges, tuck under. Continue to roll until the very end with the seam side down. Gently grab your loaf and place it into your prepared loaf pan. Then you're gonna want to cover it. I cover it with a reusable shower cap. You can use saran wrap, or if you use a tea towel, make sure that it's slightly damp because you don't want it to dry out on the top of the dough. After you cover your loaf dough, you are going to leave it to proof. You want it to rise an inch above the rim of your loaf pan. This is important. You do not want to rush this. If you do, your loaf will bake up dense and gummy, and you don't want that. So allow it to rise and check on it every so often. For my kitchen, this can take anywhere between an hour to 2 hours, again, depending on the temperature. If you have a warmer kitchen, this can be done faster. If you have a cooler kitchen, this will take longer for your dough to rise. So if this is your first time making the recipe, just check on it every once in a while and see how it's doing. But once it has risen an inch above the rim of your loaf pan, we're set to go. Now that we've allowed our dough to proof for the second rise, it has risen beautifully. It's filling out our loaf pan. We have an inch above that rim. She is ready to bake. Preheat your oven to 375 degrees and bake for 45 to 50 minutes. Now, if your oven runs warmer, then I would suggest to look at your loaf around 35-40 minutes and make sure that the top is not browning too much. If it is, place a piece of aluminum foil on top and continue to bake. You know that the loaf is fully baked when it has an internal temperature of 190 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And just like that, we have delicious sourdough sandwich bread. This loaf is so delicious. It is soft and fluffy, and when you put that butter on top, it makes the crust just so tender. Allow your loaf to sit in the loaf pan for about 5 minutes after baking, and then remove it to a wire rack to cool for at least an hour before slicing. You guys, I promise once you start making this recipe, you're never gonna wanna go back. It is not only so easy to make, but look at how delicious it looks. We love to make double batch so that we can enjoy one fresh, and then we'll slice up the other one and pop it in the freezer. It's going to be your go-to sandwich bread recipe. I hope you get to try out this sourdough staple. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!